They didn't wait for the vows to finish. The first operative drove his rifle butt into a soldier's throat before the man could raise his radio. Clean, silent, practiced, like they had done it 100 times before because they had. 12 men moving like ghosts through sacred ground with one purpose burned into every step. Take the girl, burn everything else down, and make the most powerful general in the country. Watch it happen on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. If this story hits you somewhere deep, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and follow every chapter with us until the very last word. And drop a comment telling us what city you are watching from, because I want to see just how far this story travels. The morning of Emily Hayes' wedding came in cold and silver, the kind of November sky that sits low over the mountains like it has something to say, but won't come out and say it. Fort Meredith. Military Cathedral stood at the center of it all. Stone walls, 4 feet thick, stained glass panels that had survived 2 wars, an iron gate that had never once been breached in its 112-year history. General Robert Hayes had made sure of that. He had spent 11 months planning this day. Not because he was a paranoid man, though his enemies would argue otherwise, but because he was a man who had seen enough of the world to know that the things you love most are the things that get taken from you when you stop paying attention. He stood at the back of the cathedral in his full-dress uniform, 4 stars bright on his shoulders, watching the pews fill with men and women who had shaped the course of American military history. Senators, intelligence directors, 3 former secretaries of defense, 2 allied nation ambassadors, and all of them here today to watch his daughter walk down the aisle. Emily Hayes was 26 years old, and she had her mother's eyes dark brown and absolutely direct, the kind of eyes that made you feel like lying wasn't even worth the effort. She had been standing in the bridal preparation room for 40 minutes already, her hands steady, her breathing slow. She was not the kind of woman who trembled on important days. She had grown up in military households across 4 continents. She had learned to be calm the way most people learn to tie their shoes early and out of necessity. Her maid of honor, Lieutenant Sarah Cole, was fussing with the veil. "You look incredible," Sarah said. "Captain Porter is going to completely fall apart when he sees you." Emily smiled, small, controlled, private. "He better not fall apart. He's supposed to be standing at the altar." "You know what I mean." "I know." Emily looked at herself in the mirror one more time. Something passed across her face, not doubt, not fear. Something quieter than that. A stillness. Like a woman who had made a very important decision and was at peace with it. "Let's go get married," she said. 800 meters away in the abandoned bell tower of what used to be the St. Callum Church before the congregation moved to the valley in 2009, Captain Evelyn Cross had been lying still for 4 hours and 37 minutes. She was pressed flat against the stone floor, her body temperature regulated through sheer discipline, her breathing measured at 6 counts in and 8 counts out. The cold didn't bother her anymore, neither did the dust or the silence or the way the wind pushed through the broken window frames and made the old tower groan like something living. What bothered her, the only thing that bothered her, was the gap between the eastern tree line and the cathedral's secondary entrance. She pressed her eye to the scope and measured it again. 42 meters of open ground, a blind spot in the security camera grid. She had noticed it 17 minutes ago and flagged it mentally. Now she was noticing something else. A shape at the edge of the tree line, not a deer, not a branch moving in the wind. A shape with deliberate geometry, the kind of geometry that only appears when a human body is trying not to be seen. Evelyn's hand didn't move. Her breathing didn't change. But every nerve in her body went cold and sharp at the same time. She shifted the scope 3 degrees left. Another shape, same deliberate stillness. She shifted right, a third. "No," she said quietly to no one because no one was there. She had been operating alone for 5 years. She had stopped needing an audience for her realizations a long time ago. She counted. 3 visible. She extrapolated from the formation pattern's standard Phoenix Division infiltration geometry. She recognized it the way you recognize a face you hope never to see again. If there were 3 visible, there were 9 more she couldn't see yet. 12 total. Always 12. It had always been 12 with Phoenix Division. Her jaw tightened. Inside the cathedral, General Hayes had taken his position near the front, accepting handshakes and quiet words from guests who passed him on their way to the pews. Colonel James Whitfield, 53 years old, 28 years of service, one of Hayes's oldest allies, stopped beside him and put a hand on his shoulder. "How are you holding up, Robert?" Hayes looked at him with the particular kind of tired dignity that only men who have carried enormous weight for a long time can manage. I'm good, James. I'm good. He paused. You know what I was thinking about this morning? I was thinking about that first night in Kandahar. 2003, when you and I were pinning down in that building and we thought it was over. Whitfield laughed softly. I thought about that too. Funny how the mind works. You know why I thought about it? Because I realized that night I was more afraid of dying than I have been any other day in my life. And today is the only day that comes close to that level of feeling something. But it's the opposite. Today I'm not afraid of anything. Today I'm just... He stopped, found the word. Grateful. Whitfield squeezed his shoulder. She's going to be beautiful. Captain Daniel Porter was standing at the altar with the kind of controlled nervousness that military training gives you. It doesn't make you less nervous. It just makes you hold yourself very straight while you are. He was 31 years old, lean and clean-cut, with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned everything he had. He had a single white flower pinned to his lapel, and he kept touching it absently without realizing he was doing it. The priest, Father Michael Donner, leaned in slightly. Deep breath, Captain. I'm breathing, Daniel said. You're holding your breath. Daniel exhaled. Better. Much. Outside the walls, the wedding security team was running standard sweeps. 12 armed personnel augmented by 6 plainclothes agents embedded among the guests. The security director, Chief Master Sergeant Bill Tanner, was a man who had run perimeter security for 3 presidential visits. He was not a man who made careless decisions. He was standing near the eastern gate when his radio crackled. Perimeter check Sector 4. All clear. Copy Sector 4. He moved toward the northern wall. Sector 2 status. A pause that lasted slightly too long. Sector 2 status, he repeated. Static. Tanner's hand went to his sidearm. He clicked his radio again. Command, this is Tanner. I am not getting a response from Sector 2. Send. The blow came from behind. Not a bullet. Something harder and faster. A forearm wrapped in tactical padding, perfectly placed against the base of his skull. Tanner dropped without a sound, his radio bouncing once on the stone path and going quiet. 2 Phoenix operatives moved over him without slowing down. In the bell tower, Evelyn watched the security perimeter begin to collapse in real time. She counted seconds. The Sector 2 camera feed would show nothing. They would have spoofed it already. The radio disruption was surgical, a localized signal dampener, the kind that Phoenix Division had pioneered during their Black Ops years. No general alarm would trigger. No cavalry would come. She had, by her calculation, approximately 4 minutes before the attack moved from perimeter to interior. She looked through her scope at the cathedral doors. 200 guests, 12 gunmen, and a bride at the altar who had no idea her wedding was already a battlefield. Evelyn's finger rested outside the trigger guard, not on it, beside it. A discipline thing. You don't touch the trigger until you have decided to fire because the body can act faster than the mind sometimes. And she had learned that lesson in blood on 3 different continents. She had not planned to be here. That is the honest truth of it, and it deserves to be said plainly. She had been officially dead for 5 years. The record showed it. Captain Evelyn Cross killed in action in a classified operation in the Caucasus region, July 14th, body unrecoverable. She had read the report herself 6 months after the operation in a rented room in Lisbon with bad lighting and a coffee that had gone cold. She had found the report strange. Not because it was wrong, it was mostly right. She had been in the Caucasus. The operation had gone badly wrong. People had died who should not have died, and people who should have died had walked away clean. But she had not been among the dead. She had been the one who walked away injured, burned out, and carrying knowledge that certain powerful men very much did not want her to carry. So she had made herself dead. It was easier than it sounds if you know the right people and are willing to sacrifice the life you had. She had been willing. She had spent 2 years in Europe, 1 year in Southeast Asia, and the last 2 years moving between small towns in Alaska and northern Canada, doing contract work for people who asked no questions and needed someone precise. She had not thought about Fort Meredith. She had not thought about General Hayes. She had not thought about Phoenix Division until 3 weeks ago when a dead drop she had not touched in 4 years suddenly had something in it. The message was brief, 6 lines, no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Her old handler, a woman named Carla Voss, who had officially retired in 2019 and was officially living in Scottsdale, Arizona. Unofficially, Carla Voss was one of 6 people in the world who knew Evelyn Cross was still alive. The message said, Phoenix Division did not die. They are reorganizing. Their target is Emily Hayes, Fort Meredith, November 19th. I cannot send backup. I cannot make this official. I am asking you anyway. That was it. 6 lines. No explanation of how Carla had known. No intelligence breakdown. No tactical brief. Just a date and a location and the name of a young woman who had no idea she was a target. Evelyn had read the message 4 times, then she had burned it. Then she had packed her kit, because she remembered Emily Hayes. Not from any file, not from any operational briefing. She remembered her from a photograph she had seen once 8 years ago, a Christmas photo on General Hayes' desk during a pre-mission meeting at a Black Ops facility she was not supposed to name. Emily Hayes had been 18 in that photo. She was wearing a green sweater, and she was laughing at something, really laughing, the kind of laugh that crinkles the whole face. And Hayes had been standing next to her with an expression on his face that Evelyn had never quite seen on the man in any other context. He looked like a regular father, just completely, simply proud. Evelyn did not have much that she still carried from her old life, but that image, for reasons she had never fully analyzed, had stayed. And now Emily Hayes was 26, and she was standing at an altar in a fortified cathedral, and 12 Phoenix Division operators were moving through the blind spots of a security system that had no idea they existed. Evelyn put her eye back to the scope. 2 minutes. The first Phoenix operative had reached the Eastern Service entrance. She could see him now, tactical vest under a maintenance worker's coverall, the kind of disguise that would pass a casual check, but not a serious one. He had a radio frequency disruptor on his belt. He pressed a card against the electronic lock. The door opened, which meant they had an inside source. Someone had given them access credentials. Evelyn's mind moved fast, not with panic, with the particular sharpened focus that years of training had burned into her nervous system. Inside source meant the threat radius extended inward into the guests, into the ceremony itself. There were people inside that cathedral right now who were not who they claimed to be. She scanned the exterior one more time, counted the operatives she could confirm. 8 visible, now converging from 4 directions, simultaneously moving with the quiet efficiency of soldiers who believed they were not being watched. They had not looked up. That was their mistake. People rarely looked up. Inside the cathedral, the music had begun. A string quartet near the front right began the processional, something traditional, and measured the kind of music that fills old stone spaces beautifully. The guests rose. 200 people turned toward the back of the cathedral where the great doors had opened, and there stood Emily Hayes. She was holding a small bouquet of white roses. Her dress was simple and elegant, no excess, nothing performative. She looked exactly like herself. She was smiling, and the smile was real. And for a moment, just a fraction of a moment, everything inside those stone walls was exactly what it was supposed to be. General Hayes saw his daughter, and his eyes went bright. Captain Daniel Porter, standing at the altar with his jaw tight and his hands clasped, saw Emily walking toward him, and something happened to his face that no military training could have prevented. He swallowed hard. His eyes went hot, and he blinked once, deliberately getting himself back. Father Donner noticed it. "Told you to breathe," he murmured. "Shut up," Daniel whispered with tremendous affection, and the priest almost smiled. Emily took her first step down the aisle. At that exact moment, the Eastern Service door opened, and 2 Phoenix operatives slipped inside. Evelyn saw it through the scope. She exhaled. 1 minute. Here is what most people do not understand about a sniper's job in a situation like this. The shooting is almost never the hard part. The hard part is the decision architecture. The sequence of choices that determines where each bullet goes, what it accomplishes, what it triggers in response, and how many lives it saves or costs depending on whether the calculation is correct. Evelyn had 40 seconds to build the entire architecture. She started with what she knew 12 operatives minimum, at least 2 now inside. The target was Emily Hayes. They needed her alive, which meant the initial attack would be stun and grab rather than lethal force. They would use flash devices first, disorientation, then extraction. They would want to be out in under 4 minutes, fast enough that any responding military force would arrive to an empty building. They would expect chaos. They were counting on it. What they were not counting on was that someone was already watching. Evelyn moved the scope to the tree line and picked the operative who appeared to be leading the exterior formation. She identified him not by rank markings, they would not have rank markings, but by behavior. The one who checked his watch. The one the others glanced at, the command position. She found him at 30 meters from the tree line, partially obscured, but not enough. Her breathing slowed to 3 counts in 5 counts out. "You should have looked up," she said softly. Then everything happened at once. The cathedral's eastern interior doors blew open. Not with an explosion with a pneumatic charge, the kind that makes a sound like a cannon shot in an enclosed stone space. The first flash device went into the main hall before anyone could process what was happening. A white-hot burst of light and a concussive crack that was not quite a sound, more like a pressure wave that hit everyone in the building simultaneously in the sternum and the eardrums. 200 people went from standing to reeling in approximately 1 second. Emily grabbed the nearest pew and held on. Her ears were ringing. Her vision was white at the edges. But she had not gone down. Some part of her, the part that had been raised by a general, had reacted before she was conscious of reacting, dropping her shoulder and bracing. Sarah had gone down. Most of the guests had gone down. Daniel had his hand on the altar, upright training, kicking in faster than shock, scanning the room with blown pupils and ringing ears, and he was saying something. She could see his mouth moving, but she could not hear it. The gunmen came through the doors in pairs, fast, organized, exactly as practiced. Their weapons were up. Their movements covered every angle. The largest of them, broad through the shoulders, moving like a man who had done this more times than he could count, walked to the center of the aisle without hurrying, looked at the crowd of stunned, disoriented wedding guests, and spoke in a voice designed to carry. "Nobody moves. Everybody breathes. This ends fast if you cooperate." He looked at General Hayes directly, deliberately, with the particular contempt of a man who has been waiting a very long time for this specific moment, and he said something quieter, something that only Hayes could hear. Hayes went still in a way that was different from the stillness of shock. It was the stillness of a man who recognized a voice. "Rourke," Hayes said. The large man smiled. It was not a pleasant thing to see. "Hello, General. You thought we were finished. We thought we'd show you otherwise." Then Colonel Marcus Rourke, formerly of Phoenix Division, formally declared killed in action, alongside the rest of his unit, raised his hand and gave the signal. And 4 of his men moved toward Emily Hayes. Daniel Porter moved first. He didn't have a weapon. He was at his own wedding, not a combat posting, but he put himself between Emily and the approaching operatives with the absolute uncomplicated conviction of a man who has decided that his body is the only thing standing between someone he loves and something terrible. "Don't touch her," he said. The first operative hit him hard, a body shot that took his breath out, and when Daniel drove back with an elbow, catching the man across the jaw. There was a brief, brutal exchange that lasted about 4 seconds before 2 more operatives restrained him from behind. "Daniel!" Emily's voice cut through the ringing silence. "I'm okay," he said immediately, automatically, with blood on his lip. "I'm okay." "Don't," Rourke said calmly to his men. "Don't damage him further. We only need the girl." He looked at Emily with the calculating appraisal of a man who thinks in assets. "You're coming with us, Miss Hayes." "The hell I am," Emily said. Rourke almost looked impressed. "Your father's daughter." "Good." He looked at Hayes. "General, I need the Phoenix Vault access codes. I think you know what happens if you make this difficult." Hayes was looking at his daughter. His face was doing something terrible and controlled, at the same time the face of a man who has spent a lifetime making impossible decisions and is now being asked to make the most personal one of all. "Robert," Rourke's voice had gone flat. "The codes." 800 meters away, Evelyn Cross had her eye to the scope and her finger outside the trigger guard. The first exterior operative had moved into her line of sight. She breathed in. She made her decision. She breathed out, and White Raven came back from the dead. The first shot came from nowhere. That is what the surviving operatives would say later in the debriefings that nobody officially recorded, that the shot came from nowhere, that they had checked the perimeter, that they had swept every elevated position within standard engagement range, that there was no shooter, that there could not have been a shooter. And then Operative 3, the man covering the eastern tree line, approached. 9-year veteran, former Force Recon, a man who had survived 4 combat deployments, simply dropped. No warning, no sound they could identify over the wind. He was there, and then he was on the ground, and his radio was still transmitting static into the cold air. Operative 7 saw it first. Three is down. Three is down. I don't have a shooter. I don't have a. Then operative 9 dropped. Same thing. Clean, decisive, no drama, just a man standing one moment and not standing the next. The exterior formation fractured in the way that trained units fracture, under unexpected fire, not with panic, but with a particular controlled alarm that is almost worse than panic because it means the men are still thinking, still capable, still dangerous. They went to cover positions. They started scanning. They started talking fast on their encrypted channel. Elevated position. Has to be elevated. Checked every building in the grid. Check again. Check everything above 30 feet. Who is this? What unit has a shooter in this AO? Nobody had an answer because the answer was impossible. The answer was a dead woman lying in a broken bell tower 800 meters away, making shots that the exterior operatives would later calculate with significant professional distress should not have been makeable with the equipment she appeared to be using in those wind conditions at that distance with no spotter. Evelyn did not think about whether the shots were makeable. She thought about sequence. She thought about the 4 men who had moved toward Emily inside the cathedral. She thought about General Hayes and the way his face had looked when Rourke said the name Phoenix Vault, not surprised but cornered, the way a man looks when the thing he has been afraid of for years finally walks through the door. She had 3 exterior operatives left that she could confirm. 2 more she had lost behind the cathedral's north wall. The remaining 7 were inside. She adjusted 14 inches left and picked up the 3rd exterior man who had gone prone behind a decorative stone barrier near the parking perimeter. She could see his boot. She could see his hand gripping his radio. She measured the angle accounted for the barrier's geometry and shifted to a different target, the communication repeater unit that one of the operatives had set up at the tree line. A small thing black mounted on a tripod between 2 pines. She fired. The repeater disintegrated. Inside the cathedral, 3 of the Phoenix operatives' radios went to dead silence simultaneously. Rourke heard it. He touched his earpiece, tapped it twice, and his jaw tightened in the particular way of a man receiving bad news through his nervous system before his brain has fully processed it. He turned to his second-in-command, a compact, hard-eyed man named Decker, and said quietly, "We have an external problem. Signal's gone. Could be interference from the..." "It's not interference." Rourke said it flatly. Certainly, like a man who has been in enough operations to know the difference between technical failure and someone making it fail. "Get Emily Hayes secured right now. We move in 3 minutes, not 5. Decker moved. The 2 operatives closest to Emily grabbed her arms, not gently, but not brutally either. She was a package. She was supposed to arrive intact. Emily planted her feet. It was not a heroic gesture. It was not strategic. It was just the pure physical stubbornness of a woman who had decided in the 2.5 seconds since the flash device went off that she wasn't going to make this easy for anyone. She locked her knees, pulled her right arm back hard, and when the operative on her left adjusted his grip to compensate, she drove her elbow into his nose. Not hard enough to do serious damage, but hard enough that he swore loudly and his grip broke for half a second. Half a second was enough. She pulled toward Daniel. Daniel had both arms pinned behind him by a man who outweighed him by 40 pounds, but his legs were free and he kicked out at the operative, who had broken formation to grab Emily's arm, catching him across the knee, and for approximately 3 seconds, the center of the cathedral was a genuinely chaotic knot of bodies. Rourke stepped into it personally. He grabbed Emily's arm himself, not rough, but with the absolute immovable certainty of a man who was not negotiating, and looked her directly in the eyes. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. "I have never intended to hurt you, but I will do what I need to do, and right now what I need is for you to walk with me. So walk." Emily looked at him and said with a steadiness that surprised even herself, "You shot my father's soldiers." "Yes." "You destroyed my wedding." "Yes." "Give me one reason I should walk anywhere with you." Rourke glanced toward the altar where General Hayes stood with 2 operatives beside him and Decker's weapon pressed against his ribs. Hayes had not moved. He was doing the math. Evelyn knew that from 800 meters away and without seeing it because she knew how Robert Hayes thought. He was calculating, weighing, deciding what he could give and what he could not. Rourke looked back at Emily. "That reason," he said simply. Emily went still. "Dad," she said, not loud, almost quiet, the word of a daughter who has just understood what the hostage situation actually is. Hayes looked at her across the cathedral with that terrible controlled face and said, "I'm all right, Emily, whatever happens." "Enough," Rourke said. One of the guests near the front pews, a man in a dark suit who had been sitting motionless since the flash device went off, stood up suddenly. Evelyn couldn't see it from her position, but she heard the change in radio traffic from the operative channel she had been monitoring through a frequency scanner built into her kit. A new voice. Calm. Interior. "Rourke, we have a problem outside. Kowalski and Petrov are not responding." "I know." And Reeves just went down. Silence on the channel for 2 full seconds. "That's 3, Decker said. "I can count Decker." "Who is it? The Army doesn't have anyone positioned. We checked. We verified." Someone didn't verify hard enough. Rourke's voice had gone very quiet and very cold. "Get the girl to the vehicles. Now." Outside, Evelyn was moving. This was the part that people did not understand about her. They thought of snipers as static, one position, one line of sight, maximum distance. And that was true for 90% of the job. But the other 10% was when the position became untenable and you had to become something different without losing what made you effective. She had already identified the vehicle convoy. 3 black SUVs staged at the service road behind the north wall, engines running, drivers in position. That had been her first observation when she arrived that morning. Not the sight lines, not the wind, but the exits. You always identify the exits first. Her old instructor, a man named Briggs, who had 3 fingers on his left hand and the most precise shooting eye she had ever witnessed, had told her that on the first day of training, and she had never forgotten it, know how they leave before you decide how they arrive. She was off the bell tower floor and moving down the interior stairs before the last exterior operative had registered that his communication network was gone. She moved fast, but not recklessly. Each step calculated, the old kit on her back redistributed for movement rather than position. Her rifle was slung, her sidearm was drawn. She had a torn rotator cuff in her left shoulder from an operation 2 years ago that had never fully healed. She noticed it on the stairs, but did not think about it further. Pain was information. She had the information. She filed it and moved on. At the base of the tower, she pushed through a broken side door and came out into the cold air. The cathedral was 300 meters northwest. The service road was another 100 meters beyond that. She started running. Inside, Rourke had Emily in motion. He had her right arm controlled, walking at a pace that was fast, without being a run fast enough to communicate urgency to his team, slow enough not to trigger a full panic response from the 200 guests who were slowly, painfully recovering from the flash device. Some of them were on their phones. Some were trying to use their phones. The signal jammers were still active, which meant no calls were going out, but they didn't know that yet. Father Donner had not moved from beside the altar. He was 71 years old, and he had seen enough of the world to know that sometimes the only useful thing a man can do is stay exactly where he is and be a point of calm for everyone around him. He stood with his hands at his sides and watched Marcus Rourke walk Emily Hayes down the aisle of his cathedral toward the side exit, and he said clearly and without fear, "This is a house of God, soldier. Whatever you think you're doing here, you will answer for it." Rourke paused for just a moment. He turned and looked at the old priest with something that was not quite respect and not quite contempt, something more complicated than either. "I already answer for everything I've done, Father, every single day." He turned back toward the exit. "That's what they don't tell you. The men who do the things that can't be talked about, we answer for them, just not in any court you'd recognize." Emily looked at him sideways. There was something in what he said that was almost something she could understand. But she filed it away behind the more immediate fact that her father was being held at gunpoint 30 meters behind her, and her wedding had just become a hostage crisis. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Somewhere your father's bosses can't reach you quickly." "And then what?" "And then your father makes a decision. What if he makes the wrong one?" Rourke looked at her briefly. "He won't. He never has before." He said it without irony, like a man who had at some point deeply respected the man he was now using as leverage, which made Emily feel something strange, not safer exactly, but something more nuanced than simple terror. "You served under him," she said. It wasn't a question. Rourke didn't answer, which was an answer. The side exit door opened, cold air hit Emily's face, and then everything on the service road went wrong simultaneously. The lead driver's side window of the first SUV shattered not from a bullet through the glass, but from a precision shot to the driver's door mirror that sent fragments across the driver's face. Non-lethal, exactly calibrated. The driver threw himself sideways with a shout, and the SUV lurched forward and stalled. The second vehicle's rear tire went flat with a sound like a gunshot of its own, one precise round low angle coming from somewhere to the northwest. The third vehicle's engine died. Not from a shot to the engine block, from a shot to the alternator, housing a detail so specific that two of the Phoenix operatives who saw it would later tell each other in voices that were not entirely steady that they had never seen anything like it in their combined 31 years of fieldwork. 3 vehicles, 3 different shots, maybe 4 seconds between them. Rourke stopped in the doorway. He looked at the service road. He looked at his disabled convoy. And then he did something that told Evelyn everything she needed to know about the man she was dealing with. He was not surprised. He was recalibrating. "Decker," he said into his radio, "I see it. Who are we dealing with?" A long pause. Then Decker said 2 words that changed the temperature of the entire operation. "White Raven." Silence on the channel. Then from one of the other operatives younger, his voice not quite controlled. "That's not possible. White Raven is dead. We confirmed the Caucasus operation confirmed." "Reports of my death," Evelyn said from the shadows behind the northeast corner of the cathedral exterior wall, in a voice that carried exactly far enough for the operatives near the doorway to hear, were not exactly accurate. She stepped into the open. She had her rifle slung and her sidearm at her side, not raised a choice that was tactical and psychological simultaneously. She did not need to point a weapon at Rourke to be dangerous. She needed him to know that she did not need to. Rourke turned slowly. He looked at her with the precise professional evaluation of a man assessing a threat he had not correctly anticipated. He looked at the sidearm. He looked at the 3 disabled vehicles. He did the math. "Captain Cross," he said evenly, almost respectfully. "Colonel Rourke." She let his rank sit in the air for a moment. "You were declared dead too. Seems to be going around." "You're alone," he said. "You'd think so." "I know so. If there were military assets here, we'd have heard them by now." He tilted his head slightly. "You came alone. Someone tipped you but couldn't make it official, which means you have no backup, no communication support, and no legal standing to be here." He paused. "Am I wrong?" She held his gaze. "You're not wrong about most of it. Then we have a problem." He tightened his grip on Emily's arm, not roughly but unmistakably. "Because I have 12 men." "You had 12, she said. "Present tense is doing some work there." Something shifted in Rourke's expression. The first real flicker of the recalculation going deeper than he wanted it to. He touched his earpiece. "Exterior team status." Nothing. "Exterior team." Nothing. Emily was watching Evelyn with an expression that was hard to read, shock clearly, but beneath it something else. Something that looked almost like the beginning of trust, the way trust sometimes starts in the most extreme circumstances, not from warmth, but from recognizing competence in a crisis. "Who are you?" Emily said. Evelyn did not look away from Rourke. "Someone your father trusted a long time ago." "Are you going to get me out of this?" "Working on it." Rourke made his decision in the way experienced commanders make decisions under pressure, fast, clean, committed. He pulled Emily back through the doorway into the cathedral, shouting to Decker as he moved. Decker appeared with 2 operatives, and they formed a tight group around Emily, moving back toward the main hall. Evelyn moved. She came through the side door 6 seconds behind them, not chasing, not frantic, moving the way she always moved in close quarters with the controlled economy of motion that came from understanding that speed without precision is just noise. The cathedral interior was still chaotic. Guests pressed against walls. A woman was crying near the left pews. 3 of Hayes's personal security men were down but moving unconscious, not dead. She noted it, moved past them. Rourke had positioned Emily in the center of the main hall, using her as a visible shield, not touching her now, but with 4 men in a diamond formation around her. Hayes was still at the front, Decker beside him. Rourke stood in the aisle and looked at Evelyn as she came through the side corridor. "You're inside now," he said. 200 civilians. If you fire in here—" "I'm not going to fire in here," she said. "Then we have a standoff." "We do." She kept walking. Slow direct without stopping. But standoffs have a clock. And your clock just ran out because the signal jammer your men set up went offline 40 seconds ago when I shot the power relay on the eastern wall, which means everyone in this building just got their signal back. Rourke blinked, just once. Which means, she continued, still walking, still closing the distance, that the 9 people who had already dialed 911 before their calls could complete those calls went through 40 seconds ago. And Fort Meredith has a QRF response time of 6 minutes to this location. She stopped 15 feet from him. You have about 5 minutes and change to decide what you want the next chapter of your life to look like. The room was absolutely silent. Then Daniel Porter, still held by 2 operatives, blood dried on his lip, hands restrained, said from the side of the hall, "She's right, listen to her." Rourke looked at him. "Nobody asked you, Captain. Nobody has to ask me. I'm telling you, whatever you came here for, whatever Hayes did to your unit, this is done. You're done. Take the deal she's offering, or don't, but it's the only one on the table." Rourke looked at Hayes. Hayes said nothing. He was watching Evelyn with the particular expression of a man who has just seen something he thought was gone from the world and does not quite know how to process it yet. "Robert," Evelyn said, "not General, not Sir, Robert." The name of a man she had once worked beside in circumstances that neither of them had been able to fully talk about since. "I need you to tell him what Phoenix Vault actually contains." Hayes's expression shifted. "Evelyn, tell him, because I think that's the piece he doesn't actually know. And if he knew it, he might understand that taking those codes does not get him what he thinks it gets him." Rourke went very still. "What does that mean?" he said. Hayes was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he said with the particular exhaustion of a man putting down something he has been carrying far too long. "Phoenix Vault doesn't contain operational files, Marcus. It doesn't contain mission logs or evidence of war crimes. What it contains is documentation of every order Phoenix Division was given. Everyone, all the way to the top, not me, above me." He paused. "I built that vault to protect your men. What was left of them? Because the people who gave those orders were afraid of that documentation, and I was the only one keeping it from being destroyed." Silence. Decker said very quietly, "You're lying." "I'm not," Hayes said. "I never have been. Not about that." Rourke stood in the middle of the cathedral aisle for a very long moment. His face was doing something complicated, the architecture of a man whose entire operational premise has just been challenged at its foundation. He looked at Emily, he looked at Hayes, he looked at Evelyn. "If that's true," he said slowly, "then everything you came here to do," Evelyn said, "was based on a lie that someone fed you to get you to do their work for them. Someone who wanted that vault destroyed and needed a reason to send you in." She watched his face, watched the calculation moving behind his eyes. "Think about who gave you the intelligence that led you here. Think about who benefits if those files disappear." The cathedral was absolutely still. Rourke's jaw was tight. His hand had dropped away from Emily's arm entirely without him seeming to notice. Then from outside came the first distant sound of helicopter rotors. 5 minutes and 47 seconds since the signal jammer went down. Fort Meredith's QRF was 2 minutes early. Rourke heard it. Every operative in the room heard it. The formation around Emily shifted not toward aggression, but with the uncertain recalibrating energy of soldiers who are no longer sure what mission they are on. Decker looked at Rourke. "Orders." Rourke said nothing for 4 full seconds. Then he said, "Stand down, Hick." Decker stared at him. "Marcus, I said stand down." Flat, final, absolute. The voice of a commander who has made a decision and is not revisiting it. The operatives looked at each other. Emily Hayes standing in the center of the diamond formation that was no longer a formation so much as 4 confused soldiers walked out of it. Nobody stopped her. She walked to her father, and Hayes put both arms around her, and for a moment he was not a general with 4 stars on his shoulders. He was just a father holding his daughter and not letting go. Daniel Porter had one operative's grip on his arm. The operative reading the room released him. Daniel crossed the cathedral in 6 long steps and stopped in front of Emily, and his hands went to her face, and he said very quietly the same 2 words he had said before. "I'm okay." She laughed once sharply, the kind of laugh that lives right next to tears and knows it. "I know," she said. "I know." Evelyn Cross stood in the aisle and watched all of it. She kept her sidearm at her side. She kept her eyes on Rourke and Decker. But she watched the general hold his daughter and the captain hold his almost wife, and something in her face went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with tactics. The rotors were loud now. Very close. Rourke was looking at her. The person who sent us the intelligence, he said. You know who it is. I have a strong suspicion. Then the job isn't finished. No, she agreed, it isn't. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he set his weapon on the floor carefully, deliberately, without drama, and placed his hands behind his head. His operatives one by one followed. The cathedral doors burst open. Military police, fast response team, 12 in the first wave, more behind them. And Evelyn Cross turned and walked back toward the side corridor. She was almost at the door when Hayes said behind her, Evelyn. She stopped, didn't turn. Thank you, he said. Just that. Just 2 words in the voice of a man who means them completely. She stood still for one moment, then she pushed through the side door and was gone. The cold air outside smelled like pine and exhaust and the first thin edge of coming snow. She could hear the QRF team shouting commands inside the cathedral behind her. She could hear Rourke's operatives going to the ground, cuffed secured. She could hear Emily saying something to one of the response team soldiers, her voice steady and clear. She did not stop, because Rourke was right. The job was not finished. Whoever had fed Phoenix Division the false intelligence, whoever had pointed 12 trained killers at a wedding and sent them in to destroy the one vault that could hold the real architects of every crime accountable, that person was still out there, moving, thinking, already deciding what to do about the fact that their operation had just failed. And that person did not know yet that White Raven was alive. That was the only advantage she had, and she intended to use it before it was gone. She moved into the tree line and disappeared. She had 6 hours before whoever sent Phoenix Division realized the operation had failed. That was her estimate, and she trusted it because she had spent 5 years learning to read the rhythm of people who operated in the shadows, how fast they moved when something went wrong, how quickly they pivoted, how long it took for panic to become action. 6 hours was generous, 4 was more likely. But she had learned to plan for generous and execute for likely, so she moved as if she had 4. The tree line gave way to a service road 2 kilometers north of the cathedral, and she followed it without a light, navigating by memory in the faint gray luminescence of the cloud cover above. Her shoulder was talking to her now. The torn rotator cuff that had never healed right, firing steady low-grade signals up through her neck every time she adjusted the kit on her back. She acknowledged it and kept moving. She needed a name. Rourke had given her the shape of the thing someone above Hayes had fed Phoenix Division. False intelligence pointed them at the vault and used their legitimate grievance as a weapon. That was the architecture. But architecture without a name was just theory, and theory did not stop anyone. She had one thread, one place to pull, the dead drop. Carla Voss had sent her to Fort Meredith. Carla had known about Phoenix Division's reorganization before it happened, which meant Carla had a source inside whatever network had reactivated them. And Carla had sent Evelyn instead of making it official, which meant Carla either couldn't make it official or knew that going official would burn the source before it could be used. Evelyn needed to talk to Carla in person, which meant she needed to get to Scottsdale, Arizona without using any identification that connected to any name she had used in the last 5 years. She had 3 clean identities left. She had not used them carelessly. They would hold. She reached a gas station at the edge of the service road at 11:47 in the morning. She bought a prepaid phone with cash, a bottle of water, and a road atlas paper, because paper did not have a signal and did not keep a record. The clerk behind the counter was 19 years old and deeply uninterested in anything except the phone in his own hand, which suited her perfectly. She sat in the parking lot behind the dumpsters out of the camera's line of sight and dialed a number from memory. It rang 4 times. Then a voice, though cautious, the voice of a woman who has answered phones carefully for 30 years, said, "This number is not in service." "It is for me," Evelyn said. Silence. "Then I wasn't sure you'd make it." "I made it. We need to talk." "Not on this line." "I know. I'll be in Scottsdale in 18 hours. Same protocol as Lisbon." Another silence, longer this time, carrying something Evelyn could not quite identify. Not hesitation, exactly more like the weight of someone who has been holding something and is deciding whether to put it down or keep holding it. "Evelyn," Carla said, Be careful who you trust when you get here. The line went dead. Evelyn stared at the phone for a moment. Then she removed the SIM card, broke it, and put it in the bottom of the dumpster. Be careful who you trust. It was a strange thing for Carla to say. Carla was the one she was coming to, which either meant Carla was warning her about someone else in Scottsdale, or Carla was warning her about Carla herself. That thought sat in her chest like a stone the entire 18 hours it took to get to Arizona. Back at Fort Meredith, the cathedral was now a controlled chaos of federal agents, military police, and intelligence personnel who had descended with the particular organized intensity of agencies that had been caught flat-footed and were compensating aggressively. The Phoenix Division operatives were in custody. The guests had been interviewed and released in groups. Father Donner was sitting in a pew with a cup of coffee someone had found for him, answering questions from an FBI agent with the calm patience of a man who has nothing to hide in an endless supply of time. Emily Hayes was in a military medical tent set up in the parking lot. She had refused to go to the hospital. She had a bruise forming along her right forearm where one of the operatives had grabbed her, and she had a slight ringing in her left ear from the flash device, and she was otherwise physically fine. The medical personnel had told her this 3 times. She had heard them all 3 times. She was sitting on the edge of a cot in her wedding dress with her shoes off, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching Daniel talk to 2 intelligence officers near the tent entrance. He had a field dressing on his lip. He was talking with his hands, which he always did when he was trying to be precise about something. She watched him and felt the complicated mixture of love and anger and relief that comes from watching someone you love do something brave and stupid simultaneously. When the intelligence officers moved away, Daniel came back to her and sat down, not beside her, across from her, so he could see her face. He had learned that about her years ago, before they were ever together. Emily Hayes needed to be looked at directly when things were serious. She could not stand being talked at from an angle. "How are you doing?" he said. "I'm thinking," she said. "About what?" "About the woman." She looked at him. "The sniper. Nobody will tell me who she is. Every time I ask, they either go quiet or they say they don't know. But they know, I can tell." Daniel was quiet. "You know too," she said. "Emily, don't do that. Don't give me the careful voice." She set down the coffee. "She called my father by his first name. She said he trusted her a long time ago. She knew Phoenix Division. She knew Rourke's name and Rourke knew hers, and when my father heard whoever that was had shown up, he looked." She stopped, found the word, "undone," like someone had come back from somewhere people don't come back from. Daniel looked at her steadily. "I don't have clearance for that conversation. She saved my life, Daniel. She saved my father's life. She shot out 3 vehicles with 4 bullets and then walked into a cathedral full of armed men with her gun at her side because she knew she didn't need to raise it." She shook her head. "I want to know who she is." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "She's someone who made a choice a long time ago that cost her everything. And she came back today anyway." He leaned forward. "That's all I can give you." Emily looked at him. Then she picked up her coffee again. "That's enough," she said, though her voice suggested it was not quite enough, and they both knew it. General Hayes was in a secure mobile command unit parked at the cathedral's north wall, sitting across from FBI Deputy Director Sandra Marsh and a man from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence named Garrett Cole, who had introduced himself with the kind of carefully neutral affect that meant he was measuring every word Hayes used before Hayes had finished using it. "We need to debrief you on Phoenix Division's operational status," Marsh said. "How long have you been aware they had reconstituted?" "I wasn't," Hayes said. "I had general intelligence suggesting elements of the group might still be active. Nothing actionable, nothing specific. And the Phoenix Vault is secure. The access codes were never compromised." Cole, who had not spoken yet, looked up from his notepad. "General, do you have any intelligence on who may have provided Phoenix Division with the operational planning for today's action? The logistics of this were not improvised. Someone with significant resources and knowledge of your security protocols gave them a substantial lift." Hayes looked at Cole with the expression of a man who has been doing this for 30 years and knows exactly what is happening in a room. "I have some ideas," he said. "We'd like to hear them." "I'm sure you would." He held Cole's gaze. "I'm going to want my own legal counsel present before that conversation continues." Cole's neutral effect developed a slight edge. "General, we're on the same side here. I've been doing this long enough, Hayes said pleasantly, to know that phrase is most often used by the people who aren't. The meeting did not progress significantly after that. Evelyn arrived in Scottsdale at 5:40 in the morning Arizona time. She came in through the back route, the one she and Carla had established in 2018 for exactly this kind of necessity, a route that avoided cameras and moved through residential streets that were empty at this hour. Carla Voss lived in a house that looked completely ordinary from every angle. This was intentional. She had spent 30 years making herself look ordinary. She was 64, small, with gray hair. She kept short and practical, and hands that were still absolutely steady even now. She had been one of the most effective intelligence handlers in the agency's history, which was something exactly 11 people knew, because the best ones were never on the public list. She was waiting at the back door when Evelyn came through the gate. She looked at Evelyn, all of her, the kit, the shoulder that was carrying itself slightly wrong, the eyes that had the particular flat brightness of someone running on controlled adrenaline and no sleep, and she said, "You look terrible." "I feel fine," Evelyn said. "You always say that." "It's always true, Tito." She came inside. "Tell me about the source." Carla put water on and did not answer until she sat down at the table. Then she said, "The source came to me 3 months ago, former Phoenix Division logistics officer, a man named Bryce Kellner. He was low enough in the command structure that he survived the original exposure just barely. He went private sector after, security consulting. And he came to you, why? Because someone had approached him, someone with significant government connections and access to classified personnel files. This person offered Kellner money, a lot of money, to help reconstitute Phoenix Division's operational capacity and point them at Hayes. Carla's hands went flat on the table. Kellner came to me because he was afraid. He wanted protection, but the ask had a condition: he would only identify the person behind it if the exchange was completely off book. No official record, no agency involvement. She looked at Evelyn directly. That's why I couldn't make it official, and why I needed someone who didn't officially exist. Evelyn processed this. Did he give you a name? Carla hesitated. That hesitation, the same one from the phone call. Evelyn felt the shape of it, and she didn't like it. Carla, he gave me a name, Carla said carefully. But before I tell you, I need you to understand something. This name changes the weight of this entire situation. It changes what you can do with it, who you can take it to, and how much danger the knowledge itself puts you in. I've been in danger for 5 years. Not like this. Carla looked at her. The person who funded Phoenix Division's resurrection, who fed them the intelligence on Hayes' security protocols, who set today's operation in motion, is Deputy Director Garrett Cole. The kitchen was very quiet. Evelyn heard the water beginning to heat on the stove. She heard a car pass outside. She processed the name, cross-referenced it against everything she knew, found 3 separate operational intersections, where Cole's fingerprints appeared at the edges of things that had gone wrong, including the Caucasus operation, the one that had killed her officially. He was on the authorization chain for the Caucasus mission, she said. Yes. He had access to my personnel file. Yes. He knew I was the loose end from that operation. Yes. Carla's voice was very steady. And when Phoenix Division's Kellner told me that the person who hired them had a particular interest in making sure the Phoenix vault was destroyed, I understood why. Because the vault doesn't just document Phoenix Division's crimes, it documents the chain of command that authorized those crimes, all the way up to Cole. Evelyn sat with that for a moment. Where is Kellner now? She said. Carla's expression shifted. Just slightly, but enough. Carla, where is Kellner? He's dead, Carla said. 3 days ago. It was staged as a car accident. I found out 2 days ago. I didn't include it in the drop because I was afraid the message was already being monitored. And there it was, the piece that changed everything. If Kellner was dead, then Cole knew the source had been identified, which meant Cole was already in damage control mode, which meant he was already moving to close every remaining thread. He's at Fort Meredith right now, Evelyn said. Carla looked at her. Garrett Cole, he's there. I saw him, not directly, but the intelligence team that came in with the QRF. One of Rourke's men mentioned his name on the channel before the jammers went down. She stopped, felt the architecture clicking into place with the cold precision of a calculation she did not want to be correct. He's not there to investigate the attack. No, Carla said softly. He's there to control what Rourke says in custody, to manage the debrief, to make sure the chain of command stays buried. She stood up. And if he realizes Rourke told me that the intelligence was fed to them, then Rourke becomes a liability, Carla finished. And Hayes, and Emily if she heard enough. She looked at Evelyn with the steady gaze of a woman who has lived in the architecture of terrible thing for 30 years and has never quite gotten used to it. How fast can you get back? Evelyn was already moving toward the door. How fast can you get me a clean vehicle? 40 minutes. Make it 20. She stopped with her hand on the doorframe and looked back at Carla. Something passed between them that did not need words, the particular look of two people who have been in the dangerous work long enough to know that some conversations might be the last one. Carla, the warning on the phone, be careful who you trust. Carla looked at her steadily. I meant myself. I've been in contact with Cole's office twice in the past month. Standard liaison communication, nothing operational. But if they swept my phones, they know I'm here. Possibly. Evelyn's hand tightened on the doorframe. Then she turned back into the kitchen. Then we don't have 20 minutes. Where's the vehicle? Garage. Keys are on the hook. Carla stood up. There's a burner in the glove box with one number programmed in. You'll know when to use it. What's the number? Someone at Fort Meredith who isn't Cole and isn't compromised. Someone who was in that cathedral today and who will listen. She paused. Emily Hayes. Evelyn stared at her. She's a civilian. She's a general's daughter who just survived a hostage situation orchestrated by a deputy director of national intelligence. She's motivated, she's smart, and nobody is monitoring her communications yet because nobody thinks she knows anything. Carla held her gaze. She knows you saved her life. She'll listen. Evelyn thought about the young woman she had seen walking down the cathedral aisle in the few seconds before everything broke apart. Steady hands on the bouquet, dark brown eyes, completely direct. Her father's instincts. And what am I supposed to tell her? Tell her the truth, Carla said simply. Tell her that the man sitting in a command unit at Fort Meredith with a notepad and a careful face is the reason her wedding became a war zone. And tell her that the only way to stop him from burying it is to use the one thing he cannot intercept or control. What's that? Her father's voice, in a room full of witnesses. Before Cole finishes his debrief and gets Rourke transferred to a black site where no testimony can follow. Evelyn looked at her for one more moment. When this is done, she said, you should go somewhere. Cole's people won't look. I have a place, Carla said. I've had a place ready for 11 years. I just always hoped I wouldn't need it. She almost smiled. Go. Don't speed that shoulder is going to make your reaction time slower than you think. Evelyn went. The vehicle was a gray Jeep, anonymous clean plates, half a tank of gas. She was on the highway heading northeast at 6:14 in the morning, the Arizona desert opening up flat and pale on both sides of her, the sky going from black to deep blue at the horizon. She drove with one hand and thought with everything else. Cole had moved fast. Kellner dead 3 days ago, which meant Cole had identified his leak within a week of the Phoenix Division operation being compromised. That was faster than bureaucratic instinct, which meant he had resources that were off-book personal, not connected to his official position. That was important. It meant the network around him was small and loyal, not large and institutional. Small was harder to expose, but easier to isolate. The burner phone sat in the cup holder. She looked at it, then she picked it up and dialed. It rang twice. Then a voice familiar with that same directness she had heard in the cathedral, even through the ringing in her ears, said, "Who is this?" "Someone who owes you a full explanation," Evelyn said, "and doesn't have time to give you one yet. So I need you to listen first and ask questions later." Silence. Brief processing. Then, "You're the sniper." "Yes." My father's voice went strange when they said your name on the radio. A good strange. The kind he gets when he's relieved about something he thought was gone. A pause. "I'm listening." Evelyn exhaled. "The man running the debrief at Fort Meredith right now, Garrett Cole, do not let your father be alone with him. Do not let work be transferred anywhere without independent witnesses present. And get your father somewhere with press access cameras, reporters people, Cole cannot clear a room of within the next 2 hours." Emily's silence was the sharp kind, the kind that meant she was processing fast. "You're saying Cole is behind this?" "Yes." "He's ODNI?" "Yes." That's... She stopped herself, recalibrated. How sure are you? Certain enough to drive back from Arizona to tell you in person if the phone isn't enough. Another pause, longer this time. Evelyn could hear something in the background, movement, the particular ambient sound of a military staging area, people and equipment in controlled urgency. Then Emily said in a voice that was completely steady, "My father needs to hear this directly." "I know. That's why I'm calling you instead of him. His line is almost certainly being monitored. Yours isn't. Yet. How long do I have?" "Cole is going to want Rourke transferred within the next 3 to 4 hours. Once Rourke is in a black site, anything he says about the intelligence source disappears. That's our window." Emily said, "Okay." Just that word. Clean and decided the way her father said it when a decision was made and he was done with deliberation. "Emily." Evelyn said her name deliberately. It was the first time. "What I'm asking you to do is put yourself back in the center of something dangerous." "I know, Kutoishiro. You just got out of it." "I know that too." "A beat. You didn't have to come back from the dead to save my wedding. You could have stayed hidden." Her voice was matter-of-fact, not sentimental, which made it land harder. "So I think I can handle one more difficult morning." Evelyn held the phone and drove and did not say anything for a moment. 2 hours, she finally said. "Keep your father away from Cole and keep yourself somewhere with witnesses. I'll be there in 3. "Drive fast," Emily said. "I always do," Evelyn said and disconnected. The desert flew past on both sides of the Jeep. The sky was fully light now, pale gold at the edges, the kind of morning that looks peaceful and means nothing about what is happening underneath it. Her shoulder throbbed steadily. She drove, and somewhere behind her in a house in Scottsdale that looked completely ordinary from every angle, Carla Voss packed a single bag with the practiced efficiency of someone who had always known this day would come, turned off all the lights, and walked out into the early morning without looking back. Emily moved the moment she ended the call. She did not pause to process. She did not sit with it or turn it over or ask herself whether she should believe a woman she had spoken to for under 3 minutes on an unregistered phone. She had been raised by a man who made decisions under pressure for a living, and the one thing he had told her repeatedly, from the time she was old enough to understand it, was this: when you have enough information to act. The people who wait for certainty are the people who act too late. She had enough. She crossed the medical tent in 4 steps, pushed through the entrance flap, and looked for Daniel. He was 20 feet away, talking to a military police sergeant near a parked vehicle. She caught his eye and made a motion with her hands, subtle, the kind of shorthand that develops between 2 people who have been paying attention to each other for years. He wrapped the conversation in under 30 seconds and came to her. "What happened?" he said. "I need to find my father. Right now. Not through official channels. Not through anyone in that command unit." She was already walking. Where did they move him after the debrief started? Daniel fell into step beside her without asking the second question she could see forming on his face. He was still in the mobile command unit 20 minutes ago, but Cole asked for a private session. They cleared the room. She stopped walking. They're alone. The FBI agent stepped out. There were 2 ODNI aides who stayed. Emily turned and looked at Daniel with an expression that he would later describe when telling the story as the exact moment he understood that the woman he had agreed to marry was genuinely her father's daughter in every way that mattered. "Come with me," she said. She did not run. Running attracts attention, and she needed to not attract attention for the next 45 seconds. She walked with the deliberate, unhurried stride of someone who belongs exactly where they are going, a skill she had developed in embassy functions, in military base visits, since she was 12 years old, the ability to look authorized in any room. The mobile command unit was 60 feet north of the cathedral's main entrance. 2 ODNI security personnel stood at the exterior. They were not military police. They were Cole's people, which she understood now in a way that rearranged the entire picture of the morning. She went straight at them. "I need to speak with my father," she said, immediately. The closer one young professional, with the careful blankness of someone trained to be an obstacle, said, "Ma'am, Deputy Director Cole has requested." "My father is General Robert Hayes," she said, and her voice did not rise and did not waver. "He is in that unit he was shot at this morning, and I am his next of kin. If you tell me again what Deputy Director Cole has requested, I will find a camera and a reporter And I will explain to the American public why his daughter was blocked from seeing him 6 hours after a domestic terror attack. She held the man's gaze. Or you can open the door. The two security men looked at each other. Daniel, standing slightly behind her, said nothing. He did not need to. His presence was its own statement. The closer man stepped aside. Emily opened the door and went in. Hayes was at a narrow table, a yellow legal pad in front of him with almost nothing written on it. He had the look of a man who had been answering questions carefully for several hours, precise, economical, giving exactly what was required and nothing adjacent to it. Cole sat across from him, still with his notepad, still with that carefully neutral face. Two aides flanked him, both with laptops open. Everyone looked up when Emily came in. Cole's neutral face developed a very controlled edge of irritation. "Miss Hayes, this is a restricted debrief." "Dad," Emily said, just to Hayes, looking only at Hayes. "I need to talk to you outside now." Hayes looked at his daughter. He read her face the way a man reads a map he has spent decades learning fast, specific, without having to think about it. He saw what was there. He pushed back from the table and stood up. Cole said, "General, we are not finished." "We can resume in a few minutes," Hayes said with the pleasant finality of a four-star general who has been deciding which conversations are over for a very long time. Cole stood up. "General Hayes, sit down, please." Something shifted in the room. It was the please that did it, the particular quality of a please that is not a courtesy but a warning. Hayes heard it. Emily heard it. Daniel, standing in the doorway, heard it. Hayes looked at Cole for a long moment with the expression of a man who has just had a calculation confirmed that he had been hoping was wrong. "Garrett," he said quietly, "how long have you been running Phoenix Division?" The room went absolutely still. Cole's face did not change dramatically, but something behind it reorganized the way a person's expression reorganizes when they realize the conversation they prepared for is not the conversation that is happening. "That's a significant accusation," Cole said. "It's a question. It's a question I'm going to need you to clarify before I can frame." "Kellner," Hayes said. "Bryce Kellner, Phoenix Division, Logistics, 2014 to 2019. He came in from the cold and someone killed him 3 days ago." He held Cole's gaze. "How long?" Cole looked at Hayes for 4 seconds. 5, 6. Then something in him settled into a decision the way people settle into decisions when they understand that the room has changed and the script no longer applies. "You should sit down, Robert," Cole said. His voice had gone very quiet. Not threatening exactly. Something more dangerous than threatening. Certain. "And you should think carefully about what you do in the next 30 seconds. Because what happens in this room right now determines how the next several months of your life look. And your daughter's life." Emily said, "Is that a threat?" Cole looked at her. "It's a reality." "You funded an attack on my wedding," she said. The words were flat and direct with no decoration. "You sent 12 men to take me hostage in a cathedral full of 200 people. You had Kellner killed when he went to someone for help. And you are sitting here with a notepad pretending to investigate something you orchestrated." She tilted her head slightly. "Is that also a reality?" Cole looked at her with something that was almost surprised, not at what she knew, but at how she was delivering it. No hysteria, no performance, just the clean, devastating precision of someone who has decided what they know and is not negotiating about it. He looked back at Hayes. "Your daughter is making very serious allegations. I'd recommend—" "Don't talk to me about her," Hayes said. "Talk to me. You've been trying to destroy the Phoenix Vault for 2 years, Garrett. I know, because the access attempts on the system have a signature. Whoever kept trying to breach the security architecture in 2022 and 2023 was using clearance-level tools that only 8 people in our chain of command had access to. I narrowed it to 3. He paused. "I hoped it wasn't you." Cole was quiet. "Was it always you?" Hayes asked. "From the beginning, Phoenix Division, did you run them the whole time?" Cole looked at him for a long moment. Then he said with the particular exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something heavy and is deciding in this specific moment whether to keep carrying it or put it down. "I gave necessary orders in a specific window of time under specific authorizations from people above both of us. What Phoenix Division did with those orders—" "What Phoenix Division did was documented," Hayes said. "All of it. That's what the vault is. That's what it has always been. Which makes it a liability. Which makes it accountability." Hayes's voice didn't rise. it dropped, which was more effective. Those were American soldiers, Garrett. Whatever they did it because men like you gave them the architecture to do it in. You don't get to erase them. The door opened behind Emily. FBI Deputy Director Sandra Marsh came in, followed by 2 FBI agents and Colonel Whitfield. She looked at the room, assessed it in approximately 2 seconds, and said to Cole's aides, "Step out, please." Neither aide moved. Marsh said, "I won't say it again." They moved. Cole looked at Marsh. "Sandy, whatever Hayes has told you." "I have a call from the director's office," Marsh said calmly. "You're being asked to step back from this debrief pending a review of your authorization to conduct it." She held his gaze. "That's the polite version. Would you like the other version?" Cole's jaw tightened. For the first time, the careful neutrality cracked, not dramatically, but enough. Enough that everyone in the room saw what was underneath it, which was not a man who was confident, but a man who was managing fear with the skill of someone who has been doing it for a very long time. "This is a mistake," he said. "Possibly," Marsh said, "but it's a mistake with a lot of witnesses, so..." She gestured toward the door. "Deputy Director." Cole looked at Hayes one more time, then at Emily. Something passed across his face that was almost, not quite, but almost recognizable as a man seeing the full weight of what he had set in motion. And finally, in this room with these people, beginning to understand that it had come back to him. He picked up his notepad. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame and said without turning, "The people above me, Robert. You think this ends with me?" "No," Hayes said, "but it starts with you." Cole left. The room exhaled. Hayes sat down heavily in the chair he had pushed back from 20 minutes ago. He put both hands flat on the table and looked at them for a moment. Then he looked at Emily. "How did you know?" he said. "Someone told me." He looked at her, Evelyn. "She called. She's driving back from Arizona." Emily sat down across from him. "She said 3 hours. That was about 90 minutes ago." Hayes was quiet for a moment. He looked at the wall. Then he said softly, more to himself than to anyone, 5 years. I thought she was gone." "She came back," Emily said. "She always..." He stopped, shook his head, chose a different sentence. "She was the best I ever worked with. Not just technically. Judgment. She had judgment that you can't train into a person. It either exists or it doesn't." He looked at his daughter. When Phoenix Division went bad, when the exposure happened, she was the one who refused to let it be buried. She documented everything. Everything. That's why they wanted her dead. That's why the Caucasus operation happened the way it happened. Emily listened. "The vault exists," Hayes said, "because she made me build it. She said if we don't put it somewhere safe, the people who authorize those operations will erase them and then go on to authorize the next ones." She was right. He exhaled. "Then the Caucasus operation, and she was gone, and I thought..." He stopped again. "I thought we had failed her." Daniel, standing near the door with his arms crossed and his lips still carrying that dried cut, said quietly, "She didn't sound like someone who was failed." Hayes looked at him. "No, she wouldn't." Almost a smile, the kind that carries a lot of history in it. Marsh had stepped to the far end of the room to make a call. Whitfield came and sat down and put his hand briefly on Hayes' shoulder without saying anything. The kind of gesture that only works between people who have known each other long enough that words are optional. Outside, Cole was being escorted by 2 FBI agents toward a vehicle. He was walking calmly. He was not handcuffed, not yet, but the posture of the agents on either side communicated everything that handcuffs would have. He was on his phone. He made 3 calls in the 2 minutes it took to reach the vehicle, and all 3 went to voicemail, and each one that went to voicemail meant that someone he had relied on was already making a different calculation. That was how these things worked. The network held until the moment it became clear the center couldn't hold, and then it dissolved faster than anyone outside it could believe. Cole knew that. He had watched it happen to other people. He had on 2 occasions been the reason it happened. He had always understood it as something that happened to others. He understood it differently now. At 9:47 in the morning, a gray Jeep pulled through the Fort Meredith service gate on the north side, cleared by a military police sergeant who had been quietly briefed by Whitfield 20 minutes earlier. The driver showed a clean ID and was waved through without secondary inspection. Evelyn parked near the northern wall, cut the engine, and sat still for a moment. Her shoulder was a sustained complaint. Now, not just low-grade signals, but a full argument. She had taken 2 ibuprofen from the first aid kit in the Jeep's glove box somewhere in New Mexico, and they had done approximately nothing. She had a shallow cut above her right eyebrow from debris in the bell tower that she had not thought about since it happened, and was thinking about now only because the cold air outside the vehicle was going to make it sting. She got out anyway. Whitfield was waiting near the cathedral's north entrance. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has been told something remarkable and is now confronting the remarkable thing in person and finding that it is in fact remarkable. "Captain Cross," he said, "Colonel Whitfield, you look like you need medical attention." "I need about 4 things more urgently than medical attention," she said. "Is Cole in custody?" "FBI has him, pending full review." He fell into step beside her. "Hayes wants to see you." "I know." "Emily Hayes wants to see you too." "I know that also." He walked quietly for a moment. Then he said, "You should know the FBI forensic team pulled the debrief recording from the command unit. Cole said some things on record before he understood the room had changed, enough to open a formal investigation." He glanced at her. "Combined with Rourke's testimony, which he has agreed to give fully in exchange for a reduced sentence, the chain of command exposure goes significantly up the ladder." "How far up?" "Far enough to make the next 6 months very uncomfortable for several people who thought they were very safe." He paused. "The Phoenix Vault documentation will be central to all of it." Evelyn nodded. "You built that vault," Whitfield said. It was not a question. "Hayes built it." "You made him build it." She was quiet. "There are a lot of people," Whitfield said carefully, "who are going to owe you something they can't pay and won't be able to name publicly." "I'm not interested in what they owe me," she said. "I'm interested in whether it sticks, whether the documentation holds up and the people who gave those orders actually face a consequence, or whether the machine finds a way to absorb it and move on." "I can't promise you the machine," Whitfield said. "No, nobody ever can." She kept walking. The cathedral was quieter now. Most of the guest interviews were complete. The forensic teams were still working inside, but the controlled chaos of the QRF arrival had settled into the quieter, more methodical work of evidence collection. The building looked different in the mid-morning light, older and more itself, the stone walls doing what stone walls have always done, which is outlast whatever happens inside them. Hayes was standing near the north transept when Evelyn came in. He had sent Whitfield ahead, which meant he had known she was coming before he sent Whitfield to meet her, which meant his intelligence network, even on the worst morning of his personal life, was still functioning exactly as it always had. Some things about a person are simply what they are. He looked at her. She looked at him. 5 years is a long time. It changes the face. It changes the way a person holds their body. But there are people who you could be separated from for 20 years, and the moment you are in the same room again, time becomes a formality. Hayes said, "I should have pulled you out of the Caucasus mission." "You didn't know what it was going to become," she said. "I had enough information to suspect." "Robert." She said his name the same way she had said it in the cathedral the night before, direct and without rank. "You kept the vault. When it would have been much easier and much safer to let it be destroyed, you kept it. That's what mattered." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Cole's people will argue that your involvement here, the shooting, the infiltration, was unauthorized. They'll try to use it to muddy the testimony." "I know. We're going to need your full account, on record, which means White Raven comes back officially," she said. "Yes." She stood with that for a moment, the weight of it. What it meant, the end of 5 years of invisibility, of operating in the margins where nobody could reach her, of not being a target because she didn't officially exist. All of it gone in exchange for the thing that actually mattered, which was that the record was correct and the people who tried to erase it were held to it. "Okay," she said. "I'll have Marsh handle the reintegration. We'll backdate what we can and, well, Robert," she stopped him. "Later. We can do all of that later." She looked at him. "Where's Emily?" He almost smiled. "She said to tell you she's in the cathedral garden when you got here. She said she'd be the one who looks like she was supposed to be getting married today." Evelyn looked at him. "The wedding," she said. Did anyone?" Father Donner, Hayes said, "has indicated that he is prepared to complete the ceremony whenever the couple is ready. He said, and I am quoting directly, that he has been a priest for 41 years, and he has never once failed to finish a sacrament, and he does not intend to start today." Evelyn looked at him for a moment. Something in her face did what it rarely did, which was go soft. Good, she said. She found Emily in the cathedral garden, sitting on a stone bench, with her shoes still off and her wedding dress carrying the evidence of the morning, a small tear at the hem, a smudge at the wrist, a woman who had been through something and was still wearing the dress she put on when the day was supposed to be different. Daniel was sitting beside her. He had his hand over hers on the bench, and they were not talking. Just being present in the particular quiet of two people who have been through something significant together and do not yet need to name it. Emily looked up when Evelyn came through the garden entrance. She stood. She crossed the space between them without hesitation and looked at Evelyn directly with those dark brown eyes that were so completely her own and so completely her father's at the same time. You came back, Emily said. I said I would. You also said 3 hours, and it's been 3 hours and 12 minutes. There was traffic outside Albuquerque. Something shifted in Emily's face, the beginning of a smile held back by everything else. The morning had loaded into it, pushing through anyway because some things are stronger than what is holding them. Is it done? She said. Cole is in custody. Rourke is cooperating. The documentation your father kept is going to do exactly what it was supposed to do. Evelyn looked at her steadily. It's not finished. These things are never finished in a day. But the worst of it is contained. Emily nodded, absorbed it. Then she said, I want to know everything. About the vault, about Phoenix Division, about what my father has been carrying and why. She held Evelyn's gaze. I want to understand all of it. You will, Evelyn said. Not today, but you will. Emily looked at her for a moment longer. Then she said very quietly, thank you for coming back, for all of it. Evelyn did not deflect it. She did not make it smaller or redirect it. She let it stand because Emily Hayes had earned the right to say it, and the only honest thing was to receive it. Get married, Evelyn said. Bon bonheur. Father Donner is apparently waiting. Emily laughed real full, the kind that crinkles the whole face. And for a moment, standing in the cathedral garden in the November light, she looked exactly like the photograph on a general's desk that a soldier had noticed years ago and never quite forgotten. Daniel stood up from the bench and looked at Evelyn. Will you stay for the ceremony? Evelyn looked at him, looked at Emily, looked at the cathedral walls above them, stone and old and still standing. For a little while, she said, and for the first time that day, she let herself stop calculating. Father Donner did not make a speech about what had happened that morning. He stood at the altar of his cathedral, which still smelled faintly of the flash devices, a chemical sharpness underneath the old stone and candle wax. And he looked at Daniel Porter and Emily Hayes standing before him, and he said simply, we were interrupted earlier. Let's finish what we started. Someone in the pews laughed. A real laugh, the involuntary kind that comes out of people when tension has been wound so tight for so long that any release at all becomes enormous. Then more people laughed, and the sound of it filled the cathedral the way music fills it, and General Hayes sitting in the front pew, with Whitfield beside him, and a field dressing on his arm that he was pretending not to notice, put his hand over his mouth for a moment and looked at the ceiling. Evelyn stood at the back. She had not taken a pew. She stood near the side corridor where she had come in 3 hours earlier, with her sidearm drawn, and 12 men between her and the exit, and she watched the ceremony from there, in the particular way of a person who is present but maintains the instinct to remain near a door. Some habits are not shed easily. Some habits keep you alive long enough that you stop wanting to shed them. Emily and Daniel said their vows. Not the rehearsed version, the real version. The version that comes out of people who have just spent the most extreme morning of their lives together and are standing in front of a priest and 200 witnesses saying things they mean with a specificity that was not possible before today. Daniel went first. He held Emily's hands and looked at her and said, I had a speech. I had it memorized. It was good. I thought it was good. But after this morning, the only thing I can tell you with complete honesty is that when I had both arms pinned behind my back and I could not get to you, it was the worst feeling I have ever had in my life. And I want to spend however many years I get making sure you never feel that kind of alone. He paused. That's what I've got. I know it's not poetry. It's better than poetry, Emily said. When she spoke, her voice was steady, absolutely, completely steady, and she looked at him the same way she had looked at Rourke in the middle of a hostage situation, which is to say directly and without flinching. And she said, I grew up watching my father carry the weight of things that couldn't be talked about in public. Things that cost him sleep and cost him relationships and cost him pieces of himself that I'm not sure he ever fully got back. And I always promised myself I would not build a life around someone who carried that kind of weight because I knew what it looked like from the outside and I thought I couldn't do it. She stopped, let a breath out. And then I met you. And you carry things too, but you show me what you're carrying. You don't disappear into it. And that changes everything about what I thought I could handle. She tightened her hands around his. So yes, all of it. Whatever comes after today. Father Donner said the words he needed to say. He pronounced them married. Daniel kissed his wife in the cathedral, which had been a battlefield 6 hours ago, filled with a sound that was the opposite of everything a battlefield sounds like. Evelyn watched all of it. Her shoulder was a steady fire now deep in the joint, the kind of pain that communicates structural damage rather than simple overuse. She had been ignoring it with decreasing effectiveness for the past 4 hours. She had a medical kit in the Jeep that would get her through the next 48 hours, after which she was going to need to have a real conversation with a doctor who did not need to know her real name, which complicated things only slightly. She was calculating the logistics of this when she became aware that someone had come to stand beside her. She turned. It was Rourke. He was flanked by 2 FBI agents, wrists and restraints in front of him rather than behind a small courtesy that communicated that the agreement he had reached was being respected. He was watching the ceremony with an expression she could not immediately categorize. Not grief exactly, not regret exactly, something larger than both and quieter. "They're not going to let me stay long," he said. "I know. I wanted to see it." He nodded toward the altar, where Daniel and Emily were being embraced by the people nearest them, the celebration moving outward through the pews in waves. "I wanted to see that it ended right." Evelyn was quiet. "Cole's people are already building a counter-narrative," Rourke said. His voice was low matter-of-fact, the voice of a man who has spent enough time in the machinery of power to understand how it defends itself. "They'll argue that the vault documentation is tainted, that my testimony is compromised. They'll find procedural angles." "I know that too. Does it worry you? Does it worry?" She considered the question seriously, which was the only way she knew how to consider things. "It worries me the way any true thing worries me when it has to fight its way through people who prefer it not to be true. Which means I don't stop worrying about it until it's resolved, but the worry doesn't change what I do." She looked at him. "Does it worry you?" He was quiet for a moment. "What worries me," he said, "is that my men did what I told them to do. They trusted the intelligence I gave them. They thought they were fighting for something legitimate, accountability, exposure justice for what happened to our unit. And the intelligence was a lie from the start." He paused. "They'll carry the legal consequences of an operation that was designed to use them." "You can testify to that." "I intend to." "Then do it. Do it completely and don't leave room for interpretation." She held his gaze. "That's the only thing that actually helps them at this point." Rourke looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "You haven't changed. 5 years in the cold changes everything about a person. Not the part that matters." One of the FBI agents touched his arm. "Time." Rourke looked back at the ceremony one more time. Daniel was laughing at something someone had said, his arm around Emily, her head tilted toward him. The kind of image that is ordinary in the best possible way. "Take care of that shoulder," Rourke said without looking at her. He walked out with the agents. The door closed. Evelyn stood alone at the back of the cathedral and thought about what he had said. Not the part that matters. She was not entirely sure she agreed, but she filed it and let it sit. Marsh found her 15 minutes later when the ceremony had broken into the informal gathering that follows these things, people moving between pews, embracing the bartender. Someone had produced from somewhere, beginning to do work that was genuinely necessary. "We need your formal statement," Marsh said. She was not unfriendly about it, but she was direct. "Full account, starting from when you arrived in the area and including the Scottsdale contact." "I know. The Carla Voss connection is going to be complicated." "Carla is in the wind," Evelyn said. "She left before I did. She's been careful for 30 years. She'll be fine." Marsh looked at her. "We're going to need to find her eventually." Eventually is a long word. Evelyn looked back at the gathering in the pews. "Give me today. I'll come in tomorrow and give you everything you need. Everything. Everything that's mine to give. There are pieces of this that belong to other people, and I'll tell you which pieces those are and why, and you can make your own decisions from there. She looked at Marsh directly. I'm not going to disappear again. That's what you actually need to know. Marsh studied her for a moment. Then she nodded. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, Evelyn agreed. The twist came at 2:17 in the afternoon. Hayes had moved to a quiet corner of the cathedral with Whitfield and was working through a phone call with his legal counsel when his aide, a young lieutenant named Park, came to him with a face that was trying to be controlled and not quite achieving it. General, there's a development. Hayes covered his phone. What? Cole's transport vehicle, en route to the federal holding facility. Park paused. It was stopped. On Route 12, about 18 miles from here. An SUV ran it off the road. Hayes went very still. Cole. Gone, sir. 2 FBI agents wounded non-critical. Cole was not in the vehicle when backup arrived. Whitfield said very quietly, he had a contingency. Of course he did, Hayes said. He uncovered his phone and said into it, I need to call you back. He hung up. He looked at Whitfield. He had people who weren't Phoenix Division, people we didn't account for, a separate layer, which means he knew the Phoenix operation might fail, which means he was already running a secondary plan. Hayes looked at Park. Get me Marsh, right now. Evelyn heard about this transport extraction from Whitfield, who found her in the garden where she had gone to give herself 20 minutes of air and quiet before the formal statement process began. Whitfield delivered the information quickly and efficiently in the manner of someone who has learned that Evelyn Cross processes information faster when it is given to her without editorial. She listened. She did not react visibly. She was already thinking. Cole had been extracted by people who were not on any manifest connected to Phoenix Division, which meant he had built a parallel support structure specifically for this contingency, which meant he had been planning for the possibility of Phoenix Division's failure from the beginning, which meant he was not improvising right now. He was executing a plan that already existed. He'll run, Whitfield said. No, she said. He looked at her. Cole is not the kind of man who runs, she said. He's been in the intelligence community for 30 years. He knows that running is finite, it ends eventually, and it ends badly. What he'll do is reposition. He'll try to control the narrative from a position of safety while his legal team works the procedural angles he mentioned. She paused. He needs the vault. The vault is secure. He doesn't need to breach it. He needs to cast doubt on it. He needs someone with credibility to publicly challenge the documentation's integrity before it can be used in a formal proceeding. She looked at Whitfield. Who in the current chain of command has the standing to challenge Hayes' credibility? Whitfield was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then 3 people, maybe 4. All of them are people Cole has worked with for years. He's making calls right now, she said. He is sitting somewhere that his people prepared for him, and he is working the phone, and every minute we stand here talking about it is a minute he is using. She was moving before she finished the sentence. Hayes was in the mobile command unit when she came in. Marsh was beside him. 2 FBI communication analysts were at the far end of the unit monitoring frequencies. The room had the concentrated energy of people who are doing a lot of things fast because they understand that speed matters. He's going to attack the vault documentation, Evelyn said. She did not preface it. She did not apologize for coming in without knocking. He's going to find someone in the chain of command to publicly question Hayes' handling of the Phoenix files. That undercuts the documentation before it reaches a formal proceeding. Hayes looked at her. Who does he use? Someone who can argue they have reason to doubt your objectivity. Someone who was adjacent to the original Phoenix exposure, but not directly implicated. She paused. Who asked you at the time to handle the documentation differently? Who pushed back on the vault decision? Hayes was quiet for 4 seconds. The quality of that quiet was specific. It was the quiet of a man going back through something and finding something he hoped would not be there. Admiral Lawrence Chen, he said. Marsh said, Chen retired 3 years ago. Retired doesn't mean gone, Evelyn said. If Cole has Chen on record from 2019 arguing against the vault's construction, and Chen is willing to go public with that argument now, it creates a documented dispute about the vault's legitimacy, Hayes finished. He looked at Marsh. Cole doesn't need to destroy the vault. He just needs to make it contested enough that it can't be used cleanly. Then we need Chen first, Marsh said. Chen won't take my call, Hayes said. We have a complicated history. He'll take mine, Evelyn said. Everyone looked at her. She held Hayes's gaze. Chen was the officer who signed the operational authorization for the Caucasus mission, the one that officially killed me. He did it under pressure from Cole's office. I know that I've known it for 3 years, and I never used it because I had no reason to surface it. She paused. I have a reason now, and Chen knows that if I'm alive and I'm talking, the full operational record of that mission becomes part of this. The room was very quiet. He'll cooperate, she said. Not because he's a good man necessarily, because he's a careful man, and the careful calculation right now is that being on the right side of the documentation is safer than being on Cole's side of it. Marsh looked at Hayes. Hayes looked at Evelyn. Make the call, he said. She stepped out of the unit and used the burner from the Jeep's glove box, the one Carla had left with one number programmed in which she had not used for Emily because she had used her own memory instead. The second number in the device's minimal memory was unlabeled. She had assumed it was Carla's backup. She scrolled to it now and looked at it. It was a Virginia area code. She dialed. It rang twice. Then a man's voice, older, carrying the particular weight of someone who has been waiting for a call they knew was coming. Admiral Chen, she said. A long pause, then Captain Cross. His voice was careful. Exact. I was told you were dead. I was told the same about several things, she said. I need 5 minutes. Yes, he said, just that, as if he had been ready to say it for some time. She gave him the 5 minutes. She was precise, she was complete, and she gave him exactly enough to understand what the calculation was, not as a threat, but as a reality. The operational record of the Caucasus mission, combined with the Phoenix Vault documentation and Rourke's testimony, constituted a body of evidence that was going to establish a chain of command, regardless of whether Chen cooperated. The only variable was where Chen's name appeared in that chain as a man who had been pressured and ultimately corrected course, or as a man who had compounded the original error by allowing Cole to use him at the end. Chen listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "What do you need from me?" "A statement, today, on record with witnesses, confirming the authenticity of the vault documentation and the circumstances under which the Caucasus authorization was signed." Another pause, longer. The pause of a man making a real decision, not a tactical one. "I'll be at Fort Meredith in 2 hours, he said. She ended the call and stood in the cold air for a moment. Cole was in the wind, but the infrastructure he had tried to use was collapsing around him in real time, and a man without infrastructure, no matter how experienced, runs out of moves eventually. The FBI had his financials flagged. His passport was burned. Every person he called in the next 24 hours would be weighing their own exposure against whatever loyalty remained. He would be found. It would not be today, and it would not be clean, and there would be legal battles that lasted years. But the documentation would hold. The record would be correct, and the people who had given the orders would be named in it. That was what mattered. That was what had always mattered. She walked back inside. The celebration had moved into the cathedral's reception hall, a long room with tall windows and round tables that someone had arranged with the flowers from the ceremony that had not been damaged in the morning's chaos. It looked almost exactly like what it was supposed to look like, which struck Evelyn as remarkable and also as exactly right, because some things should not be canceled by people who intend to use fear as a tool. Hayes found her near the entrance. He had a glass of something that was almost certainly whiskey, and he held it in both hands and looked at her with the face of a man who has a great deal to say and is choosing very carefully which of it to say first. "Chen is coming," she said before he could speak. "I heard." He looked at her. "Whitfield told me about the call, about what you offered him. It was accurate. It was more than accurate. It was generous." He paused. "You had leverage on Chen that you could have used differently, for yourself. I didn't need it for myself." "Evelyn." He said her name the way she had said his direct personal, without rank or ceremony. "You have spent 5 years protecting something that I built and you made me build. You came back from the dead to protect my daughter on her wedding day. You drove to Arizona and back in 18 hours on no sleep with a shoulder that Whitfield tells me is visibly compromised." He stopped. "What do you need? Tell me what you need." She looked at him for a moment. "A doctor," she said defiantly. A real one, with actual records, my actual name, actual follow-up care. She paused. I'm tired of being careful about whether I exist. His expression did something that was larger than relief. I'll have it set up tonight, he said. And coffee, she said. I've had bad coffee since Arizona. Whatever is in this room has to be better than what I've been working with. He almost laughed. He went close enough that the laugh was visible without quite releasing. He found her a cup of coffee from the table nearest them and handed it to her, and she took it and drank some of it, and it was genuinely considerably better than what she had been working with. At 4:38 in the afternoon, Admiral Lawrence Chen arrived at Fort Meredith and gave a formal recorded statement to FBI Deputy Director Sandra Marsh, witnessed by Colonel Whitfield, and 3 federal agents, in which he confirmed the authenticity of every document in the Phoenix Vault and provided a full account of the operational authorization chain for the Caucasus mission, including the pressure applied from Cole's office and the names of 2 additional individuals in the intelligence community who had been aware of Cole's secondary agenda. It was a statement that took 42 minutes to deliver. It was the most consequential 42 minutes in the case. At 6:14 in the evening, Garrett Cole was located at a private airfield 40 miles from Fort Meredith, attempting to board a chartered aircraft registered to a shell company that FBI financial analysts had traced within 4 hours of flagging his accounts. He was taken into custody without incident, which was the detail that surprised people most when the story was eventually partially told that a man who had orchestrated so much violence went quietly in a cold hangar, with his hands up and nothing left to negotiate with. Evelyn was not there when Cole was arrested. She was in the military medical facility on the Fort Meredith base, where a doctor named Reyes was examining her shoulder with the focused attention of someone encountering several months' worth of accumulated neglect in one sitting and working hard not to editorialize. This needs surgery, Reyes said. Not eventually, actually soon. How soon? Within the week would be ideal. Can you schedule it here? Reyes looked at her. Given the circumstances, yes. There's been a request from General Hayes' office to extend you full medical support. A pause. Indefinitely, it seems. Evelyn looked at the ceiling for a moment. Schedule it, she said. Emily came to see her before leaving Fort Meredith that evening. She came alone without Daniel, which was itself a communication that she wanted this conversation to be just between them, woman to woman without the mediation of anyone else's presence. She sat in the chair beside the medical bed with her wedding dress traded for borrowed clothes and her dark hair out of whatever arrangement it had been in that morning, and she looked at Evelyn with those completely direct eyes and said, I want you to know something. All right, whatever happens with the case, with Cole, with the documentation, with all of it, however long it takes and however complicated it gets. She held Evelyn's gaze. My father is going to need people around him who understand what this is, who aren't afraid of what it pawns. She paused. I think you've been doing that alone for a long time. Evelyn looked at her. You don't have to anymore, Emily said. That's what I wanted you to know. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, not because she had nothing to say, because what was in the room was something she had not been in a room with for a very long time, and she was letting herself be in without immediately calculating what to do with it. Thank you, she said, simply, without deflection. Emily nodded. She stood. At the door she paused and said with a small, private smile that was entirely her own. Father Donner asked if you wanted to be included in the official wedding photo. He said he saw you at the back during the ceremony, and he thought you deserved to be in the record. Evelyn looked at her. Tell Father Donner I appreciate the thought, but I'm better in the record as the reason the wedding happened than as a face in the photograph. Emily looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, that's the most you thing I've ever heard, and I've known you for approximately 11 hours. She left. The medical facility was quiet after that. The base had moved into its evening rhythm, the particular organized settling of a military installation. At the end of an extraordinary day, guards rotating reports being filed, the machinery of accountability beginning its slow, necessary work. Evelyn lay in the medical bed with her shoulder in a proper brace and a cup of actual good coffee on the table beside her. Hayes had sent it through Park with a note that said, only good coffee, real name same side, and she looked at the ceiling and let herself be still. Not the stillness of a sniper waiting, not the stillness of a woman calculating angles and exits and consequences, just stillness. She thought about Carla somewhere safe in the place she had prepared 11 years ago and hoped never to need. She thought about Rourke in federal custody composing a testimony that would be the most important thing he had ever written. She thought about Chen driving back to Virginia with a particular lighter feeling of a man who has put down something heavy and is only now understanding how heavy it was. She thought about Cole in a holding facility 40 miles away, at the beginning of a process that would be long and ugly and would ultimately, she believed, be correct. She thought about Emily Hayes laughing in a cathedral that smelled like flash devices, an old stone, and cut flowers with a man who had put himself between her and something terrible, for exactly the amount of time it took for help to arrive. She thought about a photograph on a general's desk, a green sweater, a real laugh. She thought about what it meant to come back, not operationally, not tactically, just what it meant to a person to return to the world after deciding it was safer to leave it, what it cost, what it gave back, whether the exchange was something you could call worth it, or whether worth it was not the right frame and something else was needed, something closer to necessary. Something closer to this was the only thing I could do, and I did it, and it was enough. It was enough. That was the sentence she landed on in the quiet of the medical facility, with the coffee going slightly cold and the bass settling into its evening sounds. It was enough. Evelyn Cross had been declared dead on a Tuesday in July, 5 years and 4 months ago, in a classified report that 11 people had read and 9 had believed. She had spent those 5 years in the margins of the world doing necessary things for people who needed precision and asked no questions, carrying knowledge that certain powerful men had tried to bury alongside her. She had come back on a November morning to stand in a broken bell tower and watch over a wedding she had not been invited to for a young woman she had seen once in a photograph, because someone she trusted had asked her to, and because she had decided somewhere in the frozen quiet of the years in between that the things worth protecting are worth coming back for. The vault would hold. The record would be correct. The people who had tried to erase it were going to answer for it slowly, thoroughly, in the manner of institutions that move like mountains, inevitable when they finally move. And White Raven was alive, not as a ghost, not as a classified footnote, not as a shadow at 800 meters watching things happen to other people. Alive the way a person is alive when they stop running from their name and let the record show them standing exactly where they stood. That was the only ending that was true, and true was the only kind that lasted.